Can you hear me? All right, great. Okay, so we were talking earlier, and the room is so cold, so we need to heat it up. That's the objective of this session, basically. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about COEs. All the gentlemen here are highly experienced in their career in setting up innovation centers, centers of excellence. So we want to learn from them. So the pressure is on them, not on me, is what I'm trying to say. But at the same time, I would like to get started with a short definition of COE. So what does a COE really mean, so that we all are on the same page? In very simple terminology, a COE stands for Center of Excellence, as you would know, but it means an organization or a unit which maintains the highest standards. In really simple terms, I want you all to remember a unit that maintains the highest standards. Now, for a center of excellence, of course, you need to define, it's a unit which is people of highest caliber, highest knowledge and highest competency who are working towards certain defined objectives in a certain defined domain to help the business outcomes. So that's what a COE is. But I'm going to ask some very difficult questions to the gentlemen here. And in between, we're going to ask you for some questions so you can make it more difficult for all of us. Sounds good? All right, sounds good. So I'm going to bring out my question list. I'm not checking my messages. For sure, I assure you that. Okay. So my first something that I want to learn from all of you is, what do you think is the right time to start a center of excellence? So maybe I'll start with Fritz.
There's numerous opportunities. I think, as you mentioned, one is when there's a skills gap, and when you've noticed, second, maybe where there are inefficiencies in an organization. And so one example I've had in the past is where we noticed many departments were doing, and divisions or teams were doing things in a similar way, but not exactly the same way, duplicating the wheel, and did not have the expertise to actually execute in a well-defined fashion. So we formed a COE essentially to centralize the practices that we were using for, in this case, it was a quality, test automation, continuous delivery capabilities, and just pure software engineering process capabilities. So we centralized our entire quality organization and built that, and it lasted for a period of time until it was no longer necessary to be centralized, and then we went back to a federated model. So in that case, it was temporary because it was filling a skills gap, and it was also filling a situation where there was a lot of inefficiencies in how we were practicing. Okay. Got it straightened out and went back to a norm.
I think that's definitely a relevant case. Alex?
Another perspective I would bring is, if you start a center in India or somewhere in the world, you potentially don't start with a COE directly, right? So in an organization like Continental, we have lots of R&D locations, we have other, what we call R&D hubs, and then to say, I'm the center of excellence for something, I need to earn that credit as well. Right, so create some track record, start maybe in some area, taking work packages, taking bigger work packages, and then eventually find out what's even the value that I bring, and where can I make the difference, where can I be the leader, right? And in that regard, looking at the USP in India, for example, what we have a tech center that is hosting really all kinds of different automotive technologies, and from powertrain technologies to highly automated driving, and to innovate, for example, in that context makes a lot of sense. We don't have the same setup in many locations, so that became a center of excellence approach then for innovation, and innovating across domains, across different units. That's something where we earned the trust then as well, right?
Okay, yeah, very well.
Yeah. So I think I'll repeat few things what Chris and Alex has already told. So to start for us, just a bit of background, we are 14th year in India. So we've been in India for a while. We are 1,600 employees in the technology in our space. So what's a COE for us is whenever there is a strategic objective, whenever there is a strategic need, and whenever there is a buy-in from a stakeholder, that's very important for us. There should be a P&L leader behind the effort. That's when we have started COEs. There are multiple examples of COE, but recently I can tell, as recently we started a COE for RPA, robotics process automation. We had the strategic goal was there from the chief accounting officer of the company, and we set up a COE here with very specific outcomes and targets defined. So that is what how we looked at the COE with some executive backing.
Okay.
Amita, there's one more example that we didn't talk about really earlier at lunch, but I thought of that we used at my last company, and that is around M&A activities. And so mergers and acquisitions is an important part of growth for many companies, as you all know. When you have an opportunity where there is a gap in your capabilities as a company, you can use what is called acqui-hire. You acquire a company and for a whole set of resources. In this case, we acquired a company that was in Barcelona that had experience in computer vision and machine learning. And so we acquired that company, and they became the COE for our machine learning computer vision capabilities. And it was specifically important because they were specialists in computer vision, and they were connected to the computer vision center in Barcelona. So they had a natural reason to have that expertise and could leverage that. And so that became our COE for computer vision.
Yes, I think that's very relevant. So from what I hear here is that a COE could start because of skill gap and redundancies. It could start because if you have to be a COE, you have to be a leader, and hence you need to justify that. And in your case, India could be a COE for a certain aspect. And as you said, it has to be a profit and loss kind of an outcome in your case, which differentiates it from an R&D center, because R&D centers generally tend not to be a profit and loss center, not have as clear business outcomes defined. So I think that's very relevant. So the follow-up question is, what do you think was your biggest challenge in setting up the COE? Fritz, I'm putting you.
Biggest challenge for me, I think it depends, on the objectives. I think the challenges in COE success deal with what is the objective of why you're setting it up and how strategic it is. Are you funding it? Are you looking for the right outcomes that are transparent across the organization? In Girish's case, it was a P&L center. There's many times when it's more just a specialty, a practice group, an area, quality in my case of that example, or computer vision. But if you don't, the challenge is really in getting clear aims, making sure everyone is aligned to the objective, clear about the goals, and that in long-term success depends that you continue to monitor those goals. And are you delivering on those objectives? If you start to forget about it and you take advantage of it, then it becomes either less strategic or forgotten and isolated, and then it can be a challenge to long-term success. So some thoughts there.
Okay.
I would start with the question, then why do you need a COE, right? So if you start with the reasoning, for example, then if we looked at, or if I look at our organization, COE, then I want to also give the location and identity, right? So something that people can connect to. Why are they working here? And for the global organization, they are my stakeholders to say, why do they come to India? Right? I need to have a convincing story why we build engineering in India and not in any other location that we have on this planet, whether it's Romania, Mexico, but also Germany, France, whatever. So if I have a compelling story to tell, this is what I'm really known for, this is what I'm good at. I use universities to connect, to grow my competencies, whatever conference like that. Some key players I hire, for sure then this is a story that you need to drive from the leadership, right? And then build really a team from down there. Which also means, it starts really with a mission, at least from some leaders, to say this is where we want to go. And making sure that the team has the right means to support that story. And it's also a lot of marketing as well inside, right? People will look at you and say, you're a center of excellence for what? You just started maybe, or we are here much longer, whatever. And you really need to tell not only stories, but you have to show results, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, again, I would repeat, but couple of main key challenges is one, setting the objective of the COE. Just to clarify, a COE is a very broad term. We might call it a COE, or we might call it a practice, and we have some other names, teams as well. We have a team called iLab, but kind of does similar work. So first thing is on the objective. Say what is the objective of the team? Second huge thing is to the people. How many people to move into that from the existing team, how many need to hire, what kind of talent you need in that group, and setting expectations with that group. That group possibly will be more horizontal rather than vertical. There may not be hierarchies, there may not be team leaders or project managers. Everybody probably is hands-on. So these are two huge challenges which we see. in terms of getting the right people there, the right skill set, and setting the objectives and getting the people aligned to those objectives.
Mm-hmm. And once you get the right people, how do you retain them? Because those are the most important assets. So any thoughts on that?
Very much, yes. Of course, it starts with people who are interested only to get in there, would like to do that kind of a work, train them adequately. I believe probably a mix of internal talent and external talent is necessary, depending on the objective of the COE. And of course, being it a COE, if it's going long term, we would look at the objectives, review the objectives over a period of time, right? Whether we need to, whether the objectives where we started is still relevant or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a strategy. So you keep engaging with that COE and see if the people understand what is to be delivered from the COE.
Mm-hmm. So, any comments from maybe Alex? Alex, do you think COE is a fad because we don't want to use R&D anymore?
Again, the one problem I would see, COE can be used from a very small team to a complete location. So when we talk about it, everybody has a slightly different understanding in it. I would even say, based on what you just said, there's a different understanding whether a COE is an isolated group or it's something that a group that is distributed among different teams is just representing for the location. So if I look for Continental, for example, then we have different products that we support out of the Bangalore Tech Center. And if you look in automotive, there's for sure a big difference if you supply a head-up display or if you do an infotainment system compared to a brake system. But there are certain things which they also share, whether it's cybersecurity, AUTOSAR, certain technologies which are across different units. And now if you say the units are there, the product responsibilities stay, but in that location, I take the responsibility to be in the forefront, to be a role model for some of these technologies, because I connect also the know-how of all the different businesses. They don't need to move into a separated team. They don't run the risk of being isolated or something, but just as a matter of, because you have the mass and you have the opportunities then in the tech center here, you show that you are a center of competence and you deliver, right? Also in masses, which is also for me an important part of the definition. A center of excellence is not having one expert or two, which is the best in the world, but you have to deliver, right? So if it's maybe even 100 people that are delivering the right product, the right quality in that can also be a center of excellence, right? Just doesn't need to be always highest AI, latest knowledge that needs to be in there.
Yeah. Fritz, any thoughts?
I think one thing that I kind of pick up from this conversation is that while they are specialists, often you need specialists that wear is what's called the big hat. They need to understand what they're doing as part of the whole ecosystem for the company or in the industry. They can't be serving just for themselves and just for a particular function. They need to see how they fit and benefit the greater good for the company. So they need to be systems thinkers a little bit, just enough to be able to understand how they fit into the whole system and how it makes a difference. If you're improving quality or you're improving data or you're improving functional outputs, you're not there just for that purpose. You're there to benefit the organization in whole. And so related to your question about is it a fad, I think the term may be a fad, but the need is continuous. There will always be a need to have specialties, eliminate waste in duplicative work and inefficiencies. But fads are not good. You had, I think in your notes, you said, is it a bubble? I don't like the term bubble, but when you think about COEs, they are fragile, right? A bubble is very fragile. If you form a COE without having clear objectives, without having clear measures, then you run the risk of popping that bubble, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Very well said, yeah.
Just to add one last thing, you said is it a fad because we do not want to use the word R&D. To be real, not much of R we do in the R&D. We do a lot of D, okay? Very less of R. So COEs is when then there is a very specific objective, very specific need. There's a strategic need, say let's assume machine learning or something which you will do very specific. That's when the R portion comes in. So that's where my experience is that it works much better with that strategy in mind.
Okay, so what I hear, and I think Alex, you brought up a very important point about outcomes that you need to deliver. So in your case, and I'll start from that side this time. So Girish, maybe in your case, how did you define the outcomes for your COE? And if you could please throw some light on that.
Sure. Couple of examples maybe I can give. One, as I said, there should be a business unit leader backing the COE because otherwise it's more of a development center, right? Business unit leader, very specific objectives. So we are currently doing something on computer vision, right? And we exactly know how that computer vision, what we have to do, needs to tie up with our existing products and will bring more value to the customers. So we have such few initiatives, and that's what is running on COEs, right? We as I said earlier, we are doing something on RPA, right? So we should have those business leaders backing. There should be when we critical look at the teams within the team members within those groups should know what exactly they are working towards. I'm sure that's when I believe that there will be great output coming out of the COEs.
Okay.
So I think it's very dependent on what kind of COE you look at. Again, I mean, I see COEs on the technology side, but I see them on the process side, innovation side as well. And if you go into innovation, for sure, you can look at the number of ideas, patents, whatever come out of that, proof of concepts, demonstrators that come out of that, relevant for the market maybe, or relevant for the world. But also if you go into some more process-related topics or into really just collaboration training, making sure that within that center of excellence you define the training needs, you define the roadmap for learning, what are the skills gap that you have, and so on. I mean, there's also a lot of things you can drive for the organization, which becomes a role model, right? Because, I mean, everybody's in the need of learning, there's new things coming, and we took, for example, the lead for a global initiative called Software Academy out of India. So while, again, maybe that concept of internal academies is not new to India, it's a little bit new to us, because in the past, again, we had so many different products which have hardly any overlap, right? I mean, again, the software development of a body controller compared to an infotainment, there was not too much need to talk to each other. But meanwhile, with the new technologies coming up, cybersecurity, over-the-air updates, and so on, there's more and more overlap in the different technologies, in the development of the product, and also in the innovation, so that we now train more across business units, across domains, across locations. And that's something which we took up then here and said, okay, now out of that domain know-how that we have, together with the training, learning know-how, how can we drive a strategy towards an internal academy, for example, right? That also becomes then a role model, and you could consider it somehow a COE, right?
Yes, absolutely.
For me, a reminder, the outcomes, you should, as much as possible, associate them to customer value. And Party mentioned yesterday, driving massive value from a COE or a global COE, the more you can do to associate your outcomes, whatever the outcomes are, to customer value is going to be better. So whether that's cost, whether that's productivity, whether it's actual feature benefit, quality, you should do something to associate customer outcomes that benefit the customer or the company's cost structure or productivity to those customers. If they're just, things like hours or particular skills, then you start to lose touch with what's the real gain. So I think the outcomes maybe don't matter as much as that they are value-driven.
I think those are some very good points. But I think that at this point, I'm going to allow the audience for 2 minutes to ask questions and throw some difficult questions at my panel, please. Yes, there you go. We're going to limit it to 2 minutes in interest of time. Okay, please go.
Fine, thank you for sharing. So my question, let's say when I'm very heavy on execution, my department is very heavy on execution, delivering, my deliverables. At that time, with the same workforce, how can I enable innovation at the same time? I know I need the ML and AI after 2-3 years down the line. With my traditional product, which I'm working on, which is very high on execution. So how to bring that extra time, which most of the workforce, the engineers need to get out of the execution mode and then invest time towards the innovation learning new skills, reskilling. So, I mean, what are your thoughts? How we can, parallelly run the innovation while I'm heavy on execution on a deliverable?
Is this question to any one of us? Okay.
You can't answer, you don't have a mic.
I can take it up. You can add probably. Okay, the easy answer is to, I know it's difficult. The easy solution to that is, of course, to get more headcount, which is difficult also. So, but on a serious thing, so what you could look at is trying to see, optimize and, automate some of the existing work which people are doing. So that's a way to free up bandwidth in terms of who are the resources. There are a lot of manual QA happening. There's automate some of the QAs, speed up the, free up the resources. Those are certain things which you can try in terms of how you can free the bandwidth. So if the business need is there, one of the other ways we have tried is reprioritizing what we are doing today. What is more important and what is probably less important. So that's a couple of things which just comes to my mind right now.
And one important aspect, if you're the leader of that organization for sure, is what is the message you give to the team, right? If they come back with an innovation idea, how do you react on that, right? What framework do you offer so that they feel encouraged to work on innovation? My personal experience is, if people, you have good engineers, they're on that, like deliverables, experts, they still like to innovate, right? If you give them any chance, any kind of ignite, any spark that you can have in there, usually that catches fire, right? You need to give the framework that it catches fire and that you don't stop it. Because I've seen cases when the managers come and maybe there's an employee coming and saying, I have an idea, and no, go back to your work, right? So you have to be careful also what kind of messages you send, what kind of trigger points you can send, whether it's a workshop that you invite everyone, because it's actually quite valuable. Those guys who are underwater every day, right? They have a lot of know-how, and you need to tap into that. And they would see the challenge, and they would even come up with good ideas because they have a concern, they have an issue to solve. So the starting point of these people is there. And as a leadership, it's your responsibility to give it the right framework. I know it's also a simple answer to a certain extent, but once you start that, the team will also find ways and come back with ideas what they need from you to continue. Right? So just think about that part.
I could just add one small thing to that. While we were talking, I recollected. So we have a team which is very specific to that specific team, where they ran an innovation initiative to say bring in ideas, and it's over and above the work. And that innovation, it was the whole process was done through gamification. So there was some game, and a lot of ideas came in. Then we put the ideas on the table and said, who wants to pick up and build a POC? No extra time, do it at your own will, if you want to, and at your own interest. And we had few of them pick it up and come up with a very raw POC, proof of concept, over and beyond what they are doing. So just we left them the flexibility to do it whenever they want. Some people worked on the weekend, some people worked, they figured out how to do it. Right? Beyond that point, we said, is when we will plan and put it onto the main product roadmap, if the POC is approved.
Maybe I don't have too much to add there, although be agile. Like, get started, right? Don't overthink it. You don't have to think of a massive 2-year investment sometimes, unless you're starting a whole new site and hiring a bunch of people. But there's times when you can just start and show value quickly. And that's the best thing you can do to really start building capabilities that people are interested in. If it benefits the company, if it benefits the employees and the customer outcomes, it should continue.
Thank you. I think, showing early wins in a COE, or sometimes even attaching it to gamification or to the performance matrix of some set of people in your COE helps to innovate. Okay. So I think...
One hand there.
Oh, thank you. But is it okay if I park your question? You'll be the first person to ask questions in the end. Okay. Okay. Zair will remember that, right? Okay. All right. So I think I have an important question, which is personally of great importance to me. I want to understand, each one of you, when you decided your COEs, how did you decide on the structure for your COE? Was it a COE catering to all the business units in your company, or was it a very federated model? Each business unit had its own COE. How did you decide this, or was it a hybrid? Or did you go make a joint venture with a third party and set up a COE? How did you do it, or why did you do it?
For me, the challenge is it's a timing question, and it can change over time. So we had an organization, I think the one I mentioned before, where we formed a quality unit, and that was a centralized quality organization, 250 people that were responsible for quality practices that were then connected to the rest of the organization for those services. But that filled a need for, because we had a quality problem and we had a lot of disparity and skills gap, we matched that with the centralized organization. So in that case, we didn't hire more people, we centralized. We pulled people from teams and created a unit. And that lasted for about 2 years, when things then became more normalized and the practices were well understood by the rest of the company. We evangelized properly, and then we could go back to federated model where each division then had their own quality teams. So in that case, it was just a timing element.
Okay. So we took it on a case-to-case basis. We looked at, I mean, there are multiple COEs we have formed, but I'll go back to the 2 examples which I spoke about. When it came to the RPA, we looked at a model where once we had the chief accounting officer backing it, we looked at a model where this COE will be a central COE for all the global geographies. Be it the processing which happens in the US to Australia to UK, all that. When we looked at the COE which had to work on the computer vision, it was more specifically for one business unit, because that was related to the more of the systems technology. So to answer the question, we look at everything in a very case-to-case basis. No rule as such, but we just keep the end business objective in mind. Whatever best works for that to reach that objective, we go for it. It's very fluid.
Yeah, I can also only underline, I mean, it's very different case to case, right? I mean, there are certain initiatives now which we from our R&D location here have on the location base, right? But then again, there's a lot of things coming up also from the teams underneath, which is maybe specific to one business unit. We let it grow, and then there comes a point maybe when we realize now it's time to groom it maybe more, to give it more framework, and it could be something potentially even more interesting for cross-BU, right? But that's, I think, really case to case, it's very different. I mean, there's a lot of COEs which are very specific to one business, and then there are some which are location, where we really say, out of all locations in the corporation, we want to be the COE. So it's really varies a lot.
Okay. So if you were to share with the audience and myself here, what's the one thing that's worked for you and one thing that's just not worked for you when you are driving your COE initiatives? And what's not worked is more interesting for me. So maybe Alex could start this time.
So, talking maybe on the more global, or more location perspective. So, in the leadership team, we had an alignment and we discussed on certain things. What I realized for sure is, whatever you discuss in whatever management meeting and so on, right? Nothing is going to change, right? So it's not a big surprise, right? But it's good to start with a vision from the management to understand this is where we want to go. But somehow you need to really overcome a huge middle layer always, right? So how to make sure that from whatever you define in that room, that it really goes down and it gets momentum. And the best way to get momentum is really to get to the people, to get a team that sees the value, that is, some engineers, right? They see the value quite often much faster than the manager or the group leader or whatever. And they want to do something, right? They want to innovate. They want to work up on their expertise. They want to build up that COE. And to get them motivated and just get every roadblock out of the way from the management, right, so that they can operate. That's also a good way to do it.
So are you saying to trickle down the message to beyond the management, having the engineers work, but communication also is very important for the middle managers and everyone to absorb the fact that a CEO is coming?
Yeah, again, I mean, communication for sure is very important, but you can also, in that extreme, I mean, if you have a group of people who is motivated on something, have fact speaking, right? And with that, basically create facts and good success stories where you overrule the middle management, which has maybe some concerns because you take away some resource or you take people away, whatever. I mean, that middle layer, unfortunately, is quite often most difficult, right?
Any thoughts?
Maybe just probably one of my largest failures of my career was I was running a COA, essentially. It was a shared services platform at a fairly well-known company, and the thing that I forgot to do was to monitor my stakeholders. So communication is important to understand. Do you have support for your COE for what you're doing? And if you take it for granted, you potentially will lose. In my case, the COE was going pretty well. Leadership changed, and I forgot to check in with new leadership. Is this still important? How is this going to change? And before I knew it, we killed the whole initiative, and several people lost their jobs, and we redistributed everybody back to their units. Major problem. We had spent years building this capability, and it was demonstrating value. It was good until it was no longer important. So you have to read your stakeholders.
It's a very important lesson. You need to keep your new boss informed.
That's right.
Okay, Amita, sorry to intervene. Just a small time check. We have 5 more minutes to go.
Okay.
Probably want to take another question at this
Yes,
point.
absolutely. So I'm going to actually open it, but I promised the lady at the back. Yeah, sorry. So I'll take her question first.
Hey, hi. Thanks for letting me talk. And my question to the panel is, what's been your experience when it comes to culture, when you drive an innovation agenda? And what's been your challenges or successes?
When it comes to culture, again, I think you need the right mix in the organization of young and kind of energetic, crazy thinking, right? It's not about age or something, but this kind of willingness to try something new and connect it with maybe, give it the right framework and connect it maybe to expertise where required. So when I'm talking also automotive business, and a lot of things we are doing is very safety critical, or at least that has a huge impact to liability of a corporation. So if a part fails, right, and millions of cars needs to be recalled, that is a large liability. So a lot of things we are doing, we have to look at, is it safety critical? Can we really deploy it? Would a customer buy it and have it in the fields out there, right? So that's where expertise is also quite helpful once in a while. And that culture, I mean, to give it the right framework, if somebody comes, has the crazy ideas to not just kill it, but maybe support it, right, with the right expertise, connect the right dots. And we are using, for example, as internal collaboration platforms for it, challenges we run internally, kind of internal entrepreneurship challenges we are running and so on. And that brings a broader crowd together, whether it's cross-domain or whether it's different thinking, the diversity of thinking in it. And I found that it's hard nowadays actually to find an idea in a closed room, right? So whatever domain expertise, whatever expertise you have, I think it's most important, the culture also, to connect the different people together.
I'll throw out one cultural element that I think is important is a learning organization. You need an organization that is willing to learn, adapt, go quickly, and evangelists within that team that are willing to share. I think those are critical to making it succeed.
Okay, so I think we have time for one last question.
So Zaire is more strict than all of us here.
Yeah, my name is Vijay. I'm a global KM leader for JDS Software. My question is taking forward from where you left. How will you able to get confidence? When did you get confidence that COE is working? What kind of actions done in COE is inspired that it's working and that's the way we are going ahead? This is a question for both of you because you have seen how we have built and how it's evolved. Thank you.
For me, it's just get metrics out quickly. You have charts, they're learnings. You show value from what you've learned and how it's changed. Before and after is really important to me. So I always look for metrics that can demonstrate quick learnings, quick action, and continued success. Let's start there.
Metrics, in a way, sometimes in engineering it's also difficult to directly measure, right? So if you're in a project, it's running 2 years, right? So it's very different from the project before. So to compare metrics, now we are much better than the project before. You would always find ways to excuse because it's a different product, it's a different customer, whatever. But I think a good metrics for me is always internal customer feedback as well, or external customer feedback. So general customer feedback, stakeholder feedback. So if they come back to me and say, please increase the team, I want to have another project given to you, right? These are the situations when I see, okay, it's working, right?
Okay. Zai, can we take one more question because we
Sure.
started late? Okay. We have a problem. Okay, there's a gentleman at the back.
No, I think mine is enough.
Hello, I am Shiva from SKF. My experience is mostly the center of excellence when it gets established. Normally, when there is so many mishaps or fire accidents, suddenly they find that one group of team who is doing well, you become center of excellence. And then all of a sudden they feel that from the next day we become center of excellence. We have to do our job. Also, we have to educate a lot of people in the organization. So they really find a lack of time to do this in a right way, because they need to develop a lot of standard practices and they need to establish themselves. It takes a time like 1 or 2 years to do this really well to become a center of excellence. But by this time, they are already questioned about their abilities. Many people, they say, you are the center of excellence. Why you're not doing? Why you're not helping? How do you see this?
Yeah, probably I'll take it. So that can happen, but that's a reactive way of starting a center of excellence. It's always better to do it a proactive way. Whenever you have a business objective in mind, that probably has different ways of solving it rather than a COE is what I feel. COE may not be the best solution for when the situation is reactive. It's always good when there is something proactive and there's a strategic need and there's a business leader behind the need. That's when the COE is, there's a chance of COE getting more successful.
One more question can we take?
I think we should start concluding now.
Control. All right, one more question.
Okay.
Okay. There was one question here, I think. Yeah, I think this. One. That's the last question.
How we evaluate the COE performance over a period of time? I think you answered that, checking the chart. But it happened that you moved the COE from one location to another location after 1 or 2 years because of the performance. And how you see the CO global, how India market and bringing more CEOs to India? How, is there any skill you look out or something?
I know that's a tricky one. Maybe I'd flip it to being, instead of COE, just be an EC. Let's just be excellent and do good things, deliver value. I don't know, it's a glib answer. Maybe you have a better one?
Yeah, no, we don't look at taking a COE which is running somewhere,
Yeah.
getting it to India. We don't do that. It's about starting something. The title said global COEs. That's where the focus is. Starting something here for the rest of the world. Every region has their expertise, and probably they need to continue. So we look at unique areas where we can participate and bring business value.